Welcome back to another episode of Heavy Wireless. My name is Keith Parsons, and today we happen to be in Phoenix during the 3-day boot camps prior to the conference. And I have with me Jason Beshara. Jason, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Keith. Thanks for having me.
You are here teaching a deep dive, basically a 6-hour course on Flipper Zero.
Yes.
So for those in the audience who don't know what a flipper is, what's a Flipper Zero?
So the easiest way to describe what a Flipper Zero is to somebody who's not technological at all. I'll use my wife, for example. I tell her it is a Swiss Army knife. It's a Wi-Fi or a wireless Swiss Army knife. So it's got a lot of technology packed into a little pouch. We're talking about everything from Bluetooth to sub-gigahertz to 125 low-frequency kilohertz to high-frequency 13.56 NFC. You can attach some modules, some GPIO modules. So there's a lot that you can do with this small device.
So it has a battery.
Correct.
Has a little screen.
Correct.
Has like a D-pad controller.
Correct. So if you're, a gamer, you're already, 3 steps ahead.
And I saw just a little while ago, they have a gaming module you can add to it.
They do. So that's actually one of the cool new things that they've come out with this year. And as you can imagine with this device, since it's an open source project, there is tons of modifications, applications, and again, GPIO developer modules that people actually develop for the Flipper that you can plug in, whether it be a Wi-Fi module, it could be a Wi-Fi module with a Bluetooth, it could be an amplified sub-gigahertz, it could be a camera with a Wi-Fi module, a Bluetooth module, and an amplified sub-gigahertz. People are starting to get really creative and really crazy with the amount of things that they're coupling onto these GPIO boards.
I mean, is that running Linux? What's the OS that's inside this little box?
That's a great question, Keith.
It's a magic OS.
I am not entirely sure about that. I do believe it's Linux based. I'd have to go back and look at the bits and bytes of it. I'm not entirely sure.
But you do it all through an interface.
Correct. There's multiple ways to manage the device. So there's a application-based interface that you can either load onto a Windows-based machine or a MacBook. There are applications in the iOS stores and the Android stores, respectively, for mobile devices. You have a localized application that will run on Windows and Mac OS. You have applications for Android and iOS-based devices. That way, you can either wire the device via USB-C to a computer, or you can connect remotely via Bluetooth and manage the device that way.
In the student kit that the students are in your class, the deep dive, they're receiving the Flipper Zero,
Mm-hmm.
the little computing model, plus a Wi-Fi development board. What's that extra board for?
So if you're familiar with the ESP32, which we've all seen in some flavor, shape, or form, whether it was the Distike with the authentication watches and boards that we saw a few years ago, this is really nothing more than that. It's somebody took the ESP32C ESP32S2 chipset, and they built it into a GPIO module. Basically, it has all of the functionality of the deauthors that we saw. You can do everything from the probe attacks to the individual client or station attacks. You can, of course, the Rickroll attacks. Everything that we saw with the ESP32 chipsets are there available now. Now, what I'm waiting for is Expressive, is the company who manufactures the ESP32, has just released a new C5 chipset, which incorporates 5 gigahertz into the ESP32 platform for the first time.
That's what I was leading to. Some people think the Flipper Zero, even with the development board, is just a hacking tool. And if you're worried, it's only been 2.4, so who really cares?
It really is. It's nothing more than we've been able to do with the current set of tools that we've had for the past 5 years. It just builds upon the same chipset in a different form factor.
And it is admittedly kind of fun to be able to go and see things in 2.4 and do things and have those little attacks. Not that we're doing any bad things.
No, they're absolutely a great, in air quotes right now, teaching tool, as I put my fingers up in the air.
And you are teaching on it. And whenever I started a long time ago in the security side, and I like to say the difference between hacking and learning is permission.
Yes. Yes, and that is one of the things that we talk about in every one of the labs that I've developed for this course. There is an ethical disclaimer, right? Is what you are about to do considered ethical, and do you have the permission of whatever signal that is being broadcast? Do you have the permission by the owner of that signal to do what you're about to do? If you can check off both of those boxes in the course, then we can proceed. If you can't check off both of those boxes, then we will not proceed, because we will always lead with being ethical.
As we all should. Yes, we like being ethical, but it's also fun to play. So is the Flipper Zero a fun toy to play with?
It is a fun toy. I will say that there was some bad press last year that it received, specifically out of Canada, and unfortunately there's a lot of FUD around it, right? You see videos on YouTube or TikTok that shows a flipper doing something like changing a traffic light, and while theoretically possible, the video is complete FUD. The individual wasn't even using a GPIO module that had an LED attachment, which that's the way that they would have done it. So trying to get through a lot of that, Canada had actually banned them for a moment because they had received information that they were instrumental into auto theft. One of the things that they failed to mention is the only thing that the flipper could open were cars that were 25 years and older that lacked rolling codes on their key fobs. Right, so think of things from 1999 and before. Not really that big of a concern with all of the rolling codes that are implemented.
But
in
it
today's
looks
cars.
so cool when you do it.
It does, and I will tell you, you can actually remotely copy, or you can copy your key fob today. You can use it once. The process that you'll have to go through after you do that is a painful one. Ask me how I know. You will have to go to the dealership and have your key fobs reprogrammed if you use the flipper to emulate a signal once on it.
As in the rolling code on the real one now missed its cycle.
Now you are out of sync, correct, and your key is rendered useless.
Well, you learn something. See, it is a learning tool.
It's very much a learning tool. You learn what not to do really quickly with it.
Hopefully you had a spare fob.
So funny enough, I used my wife's car. My wife was the guinea pig for one reason. Her car actually has a feature in it to where you can reprogram the key fob in the car by placing it in the center console.
Slot, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I made sure that I used her car and not my car that lacked that feature. And when I locked her car out, I was able to reprogram the fob without taking it to the dealership.
Well, I don't think the YouTube videos show that. It kind of reminds me of a YouTube video where someone puts a popcorn kernel on the table and then uses a couple of phones to make it pop.
Exactly.
They didn't happen to tell you there was a microwave oven 2.4 gigahertz transmitter underneath, like kind of by where they were sitting without any shielding on it.
Bold strategy.
Yeah, very, very bold. And hopefully the Darwin effect, they win some Darwin Award for doing that and don't pass on their genes. In this class, you've got 6 hours. What kind of topics and lab exercises do you have planned?
So I start out, we kind of roll through all of the different technologies. We start out simple, right? And we start out at sub-gigahertz, and there are a lot of things that we can do in the sub-gigahertz range, or a lot of different technologies that the flipper can play with, whether it be different sub-gigahertz remotes or garage doors or LED controllers. There is a host of, if you just turn on the flipper and set it on the table, you would see a host of different sub-gig frequencies that stand out. Once we move through sub-gigahertz, we move into some of the low-frequency and high-frequency access control cards. And I know way more about access control cards now than I ever wanted to. The access control card, it's the Wild West, whether you're talking about low frequency and all of the different manufacturers, or even the high frequency with the different MyFair, MyFair 1K, MyFair 4K, MyFair 8K, MyFair DesFire. There are so many different competing technologies out there. I'm honestly astonished that anybody who works in that industry knows how everything functions. Now you couple that, and funny you say, Keith, you said something earlier that this, kind of a security-based class. This is quickly turning into a physical security deep dive because there's another lab that we created here, and this one has to do with a physical key. So what we can do is we can take, let's say, a quick set key, right? Everybody has a quick set key
Quickset
for
as
their home.
for those who are outside the U.S., it's a manufacturer of home keys, and lots of houses have these type of keys.
So the one thing that we can do with the Quickset, or any manufacturer for that matter, is there is a new tool available into the flipper called Key Copier. And basically what this does is it allows you to place the key, the outline of the key up on the flipper, and you can, by selecting up and down, go across the bitting of the key to form the outline of the key. Basically, this will give you the 5, 7, 9-digit key code or key bitting that you can then in turn take to a locksmith and have a key made. Or my new favorite thing is incorporating past deep dives from WLPC into my current deep dive, which was 3D printing keys. And what we did is we did this lab a little bit backwards to where we gave each one of the students a 3D printed key. We'll have them discover the bitting, and then we will take them to, there's a couple websites out there that will actually create an STL file directly from the key manufacturer and bitting that you input into the website, and then you can 3D print a fully workable key that works in all of the door locks.
So this is, if we just go back into the movies we've watched in the past, where someone grabs a key, sticks it into a little piece of clay or something to capture it.
Yes.
Instead of using clay, the Flipper Zero itself has a screen, and you kind of map what the key looks like, and then that can be turned into a STL file. By the way, if you're not into 3D printing, it's the file format that a 3D printer uses, and print a light key. These 3D printed keys do they work?
They work amazing. They work just like a regular key, and they're quite durable. I mean, I'm printing them out of PLA, which is not the most durable 3D printing material, and they have no issues. I've used them multiple times on all of the doors around my home. The keys that I've printed, of course, because I gave myself permission, and they just work. It took me some. Again, they didn't work right out of the gate. It took me some different ways of fiddling with the way that I was placing the key and printing the key before I finally figured out how to print it with the most accuracy for it to work.
And again, this is kind of security related, kind of hacking, the whole permission bit. But if you have physical access to a key now, you can just go down the store and get a copy of it.
Absolutely.
So this isn't any crazy thing that we should really be worried about. It's just a new technique of doing it. If I could photocopy your key, I could pull the same stunt off.
Well, so funny you mentioned that, Keith. So there, the websites that allow me to create the STL files will also allow you to upload a photo. So if somebody could just take a picture of your keys, they have the ability to scale it to the correct size within the photo and then discover the bitting just from a photo of a key. So, people think about, oh my God, well, I can't leave my keys around. Not even you can't leave your keys around, physical security. Don't even leave your keys out. People have those little, key holders on the side of their waist.
If they're just dangling there?
They're just dangling there. Somebody could absolutely take a picture of that, go and print a 3D key, and gain access into whatever those keys go to.
Well, going back to the flipper, so you talked about the lower frequencies, and I'm guessing those are built into the flipper itself. Its radio supports that. As you get up higher frequencies, the ones you did for access control, what kind of frequency ranges are we talking about here?
So the high frequency stuff, or NFC, that's up in the 13.56 megahertz range. So, and again, we talked about all of the MyFair, the DesFire cards. Typically, you will see that type of access control in more secure environments. Think of hotels or train stations, for train passes. You will see some of that in like sporting events, or I'm sorry, not sporting events, like a Dave & Buster's, where you'll get a play card, you'll recharge your card. That's the same technology that they use for all of their video gaming machines.
And I'm pretty sure if you went in Dave & Buster's, they would not give you permission to copy those cards.
No, it's funny as that you say that. So, again, one of the FUD videos came out that showed somebody using a Flipper Zero, and they were acting like they were using it to play for free. What they didn't show you in that video online is that they had just emulated their card or copied their card and were emulating it from the Flipper Zero. Dave & Buster's has enacted a policy, a zero tolerance policy, that anybody that was seen with a Flipper Zero on their property were immediately to be escorted off the premises.
For good reasons, because I'm very sure they didn't give that permission. NFC is also other things we use NFC for.
Absolutely.
What other kind of labs do you have with those?
So I've got some labs geared around end tags. If you're familiar with end tags, so there's lots of different flavors of end tags. End tags 213, 214, 215, 216, and so on. Basically, as you go up in number, what that signifies as you go from 214 to 215, like end tag 215 has, I believe it's about 512K of memory. If you go up to end tag 216, it's up into the 800 kilobits. But much like a QR code, it allows you to write that amount of data to the tag. I can take anything and write it to a tag, whether it be, let's say, a URL or even a Wi-Fi network and a PSK, right? So somebody takes their mobile device. Let's say somebody takes their Android device and taps it on an NFC chip. They get a prompt to join the Wi-Fi network. Somebody takes their Apple device and does that, they won't get a prompt because Apple has actually locked out that feature. Now, again, if you go to do a URL, that will work on an Apple device, but just know this, if you create a NFC tag, an N tag with a Wi-Fi login, they will not work on Apple devices because Apple has limited that capability.
And I wonder how you learned that.
Trial and error.
So one of the other things you mentioned as in preparation for this is you have some chipping that you would use for veterinarians who would put in dogs.
Yes.
And you have some spares if anyone at the conference wants to get their hand chipped.
If we need to chip anybody in case, we're worried about them wandering off or getting lost, we've got some different varieties of livestock and animal chips. I've got a couple different examples from small, medium to large, so things that you could use, let's say, in an animal from the size of a gerbil all the way up to the size of an elephant. And basically, these are low-frequency specialty RFID tags that will give a serial number and a unique identifier that usually ties back into a database. So there's no real self-identifiable or personal identifiable information on the chipset. It all ties back into a database. Now, there is one unique identifiable characteristic, and that's that these chipsets generally provide a temperature reading. So if you bring your animal into the vet, and they want to do a quick scan they can usually get a temperature right off of the animal.
I don't know. Last year, did you have any takers for that?
I did not. We did chip the ruckus dog. So wherever he is in the world, he does have a chip in him.
His temperature's probably not. Yeah, not doing really well.
Not too well at all.
So we worked our way up in the frequency. What kind of labs do you do in Wi-Fi frequencies?
So in Wi-Fi frequencies, only 2.4 gigahertz because that's what we're limited
so far.
to. Correct. So far, that's what we're limited to by the ESP32 chipset. Hopefully next year by this time, we should start to see some proliferation of the new C5 chipset and hopefully see some of the 5 gigahertz stuff come into that same form factor. So fingers crossed.
If someone listening was thinking, I kind of want to play with the Flipper Zero, how would you recommend they start?
I would recommend first and foremost, you've got to get one. So order a Flipper Zero, order a silicone case, order all the protective bits from it. You'll thank me later. After that, And
by the way, they're in stock. A while ago, they were really hard to come by.
They were for a while there, especially when we had the issues with shipping. There were a couple of shipments that got caught up and contained by customs. Eventually, they were let go, but there was a scare there for a while that there were going to be no more Flipper Zeros.
And I'm glad I wasn't one of the ones who tried to arbitrage them and stock up on them. So if you do want one, you can just go on the website and we'll have the links in the show notes and get the parts. And so how do you start playing with it?
I would say YouTube is a great source out there. There are multiple people, and honestly, it really depends upon the technology that you want to look at. If you're looking at NFC, for instance, there's a guy out there named Iceman. That's all he does is low frequency, high frequency, RFID, and NFC hacking and emulation. That's what he is known for in the community. If you're looking at doing some more basic or generalizations or generalized things with the flipper with sub-gigahertz or Bluetooth, again, YouTube is probably your place to be. There's another guy out there named Talking Sasquatch who does a ton of different labs and exercises with the Flipper Zero. One of which is a new lab that we're going to incorporate and try this year. It's called Find My Flipper, where we take either an AirTag or a Tile Pro device. We look at we get the MAC address off of that with an NRF program, and then we take that and we emulate it with the flipper. We have to obviously shut the device down, take the battery out after we've emulated its signal, and then we can essentially turn the flipper into an AirTag or Tile device that's discoverable via Bluetooth in the Find My app or in the Tile app on whatever platform.
And again, back to the permission thing. You have permission. It was your AirTag. You did this.
Yes.
But afterwards, have you tested what happens when you turn the AirTag back on and there's now two?
Absolutely. So what happens when you place that battery back into the AirTag is that there's a rolling MAC address. So the AirTag goes back and communicates with the phone, re-registers, and now your flipper is dead from Find My Flipper. However, the process is very easy to replicate and do over again. So if you ever find yourself where you've put your battery back in your AirTag and it re-registers, just go back through the steps. It's a very simple process. You put it in lost mode, take your battery out. You do have to have some physical separation from the phone for it to actually go into lost mode. That was kind of tricky at home. I actually had to utilize the microwave as a Faraday cage for a while, and that actually worked. But once you do all of that, you can register it back to the flipper again, and you can do that as many times as you want.
And just by the way, a flipper is a very expensive solution for another AirTag.
Extremely.
And not nearly as convenient.
No, not at all. But a little more fun.
But it's a learning tool.
Yes, it's a little more fun.
Yeah. What other new things do you have this year in?
So I think everybody has heard me talking a lot about 3D printing this year. And again, I thank you for that, Keith. That's another habit that I got from this conference. But incorporating that into the class, I've printed some Wi-Fi dev boards, cases, because it's just a raw printed circuit board, right? So it could be easily damaged. So I printed some cases for that. I printed a couple of giveaways for the overall flipper cases. But I want to say, and this is kind of off topic, but 3D printers have come an amazingly long way just from the time I took my deep dive here, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago
yeah.
now, to now. This is not a paid advertisement, but Bamboo Labs, keep doing what you're doing.
I've been playing in the 3D world for a while, and the examples you showed with multiple colors as smooth as I've ever seen before. So very, very impressive there. If someone wanted to track you down and say, where can I find this Jason Beshara guy? Where would they find you?
You can find me on all of the socials. Probably doesn't matter which one. Pick one, but it is at Jason Beshara. Last name spelled Beshara. And all of the socials.
Great. Well, this has been a very entertaining and educational episode talking about the Flipper Zero, everything from very low frequencies up through Wi-Fi, and maybe in the future we'll even get up to 5 gigahertz. If you want more information, you can look in the show notes for where you can find your own Flipper Zero. This has been another episode of Heavy Wireless, part of the Packet Pushers Podcast Network, and we look forward to talking with you in the future.